All right. On today's episode of the Rhody Rumble, I welcome on a very special guest. He is also a fellow podcaster as well, too. He is Adam Bernstein. He is the host of the Rhody Rumble podcast. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
How is the podcasting world going?
Yeah, we were just talking about it before we started recording. It's going well. It's a bit of a grind. I've been doing it now for about a year since really COVID started, about a year or so, or a year and a half now. But it's always a grind trying to scramble and find guests, as you know. But it's a lot of fun. I've been able to develop so many connections through it, network. And I love doing it.
That's awesome. That's great. And how did you come up with the name Rhody Rumble? Where did the idea come from and everything?
Yeah. Rhody Rumble. As for the name, the logo, I can tell you my friend helped me out with that. I have little to no Adobe Photoshop or any of those skills. I picked up Premiere and how to edit now through doing the podcast, and he's helped me out through a lot of those experiences and some of the projects I've had to do. But as for the name and just the brand itself, I don't know. I mean, I think I just came across it. I was trying to think of something that sort of flowed, and Rhody Rumble, I guess it just came to me, and I reached out to one of my friends who's an offensive lineman on the football team. He's been able to help me out with it. He's been great at getting me some great guests on the football team and other Rhode Island athletes and coaches, members of the media as well. And I've just been going with it for the last year and a half, like I said.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. I mean, you've had some really great guests on the show. You're about 40, I think you're around 40 episodes in right now, 38.
Yep.
Recently had Karan Iverson on, who was, an integral part of that URI team that made a run into the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, they lost in that Oregon game, which I don't really like to talk about as much. But I mean, you attend URI, and which you mentioned. But what's it like to be attending URI, which is just a smaller, it's a bigger school, but it feels like there's a smaller community. They have great outlets for the media and stuff like that. So what's it like to be part of the Harrington Communication School and everything?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit before we started recording, but I'm actually from New York originally. When I came to Rhode Island, I didn't really know much about the state actually, or even the university. I'd followed the basketball program and the athletics for a while. My dad actually went to URI, so I had that going for me. But then I saw, what the Harrington School had to offer and just the communications itself. Sports media, I never even knew when I was applying to schools existed. But I came across it and I saw the opportunities that it had, the connections that I've been able to make, not only within the Harrington School and the University of Rhode Island community, but Rhode Island itself was great. Like I mentioned before, I've been able to connect with, some of the sports anchors in Providence, some of the journalists for some of the outlets in Providence, people in Narragansett, people in Johnston, Cranston. Really, it's such a small state, so the network and the window of opportunities to connect with people, athletes, coaches, and media members is great. You don't really get that in New York because it's such a big state, and there's so many different people you can reach out to. Whereas Rhode Island, you can go right to the top. It's just you have to grind a little bit and work for it, and eventually you'll be connected to some people you never would have thought you would be connected to.
That's so cool. What's a person that you would have never thought you'd be connected to, that's just off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, some of the people in the athletics department at the University of Rhode Island, going straight to the top, the athletic director. I always say we have the best athletic director and sports information director, who's now the associate athletic director, Shane Donaldson, but the athletic director, Thor Bjorn, they're great. Everyone in the athletics department, people go to a school like Syracuse or any of those Big Ten, Big East schools, and it's hard to just reach out to the athletic director, some of these coaches. But at the University of Rhode Island, you're able to, get a hold of them as early as freshman year and get those opportunities to broadcast the game or even write an article that hundreds of kids will see. So it's really cool just being able to be connected to, people at the national level, but are so small within your university.
Yeah. It's so I didn't go to URI, but I feel like the communities just seems like a good community down there, especially in the communications. Like you said, you have access to the athletic director. You even had him on your podcast, and and then the other people in the media, in the sports information area. So it's got to be really cool for you just to be able to, you work hard on this podcast, but you also see the results of it too, as well as you're able to contact the people in sports information. You also work in the communication. So that's got to be all really great for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, I mean, one connection can lead to so many different more. So I can reach out to the sports information director, have a relationship with him. He can see me at the games. And then I can shoot him an email saying it's great meeting you. And then he can have, the starting point guard of the team on the very next day on the podcast. So it's such a small state, but it's such a big school. So you're able to make these connections with big people at the school. But really, in retrospect, when you look at everything, it's so small. Rhode Island is it's a small state. So, it's great. I mean, again, like I never would have thought I would have been connected to some of these people, even some of the basketball players. My dad went to the University of Rhode Island, so I grew up watching this basketball program the last couple of years, especially during their NCAA tournament runs. Now it's crazy that I'm interviewing a lot of those players that played on those teams during the NCAA tournament runs.
Yeah. It's really cool. When did your dad go to UR? I'm just curious.
Yeah, he went in the late 80s. So
Okay.
He graduated in 1987, right before 1988, which was their Sweet 16 run.
Yeah. That's crazy. So your dad just missed the.
Just missed it. He was at one of the NCAA tournament games. I believe it was the game against Duke. And I actually had Kenny Green on the podcast, who is the all-time blocks leader at the University of Rhode Island. I had him on the podcast, who played while my dad was there. And I asked him about that game. They beat Syracuse, I believe, who was the national champion in 1987. I believe so. They beat them in 1988, and then I believe they lost to Duke in the Sweet 16. But that's a year that we remember forever at the University of Rhode Island. You walk into the Ryan Center, you look up into the rafters, and you see that year. So it's crazy to be in this era, but look back and reflect on that era, even though I wasn't alive to see it. But that's why we have YouTube. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I'm sure would your dad have any questions for him or anything like that? Or was your dad just excited?
Yeah, actually, with that script that I wrote for Kenny Green, I've been trying to get a couple of the players on during that time. Tommy Garrick, Bonzi Colson, Silk Owens. During those teams, I've been trying to get a lot of those players on, but I had Kenny Green on. I was able to connect with him through Twitter, and I immediately texted my dad, and he helped me immediately. I didn't even have to do that much research because he helped me ask a lot of the questions or write a lot of the questions for him. And then I think my dad actually sent him a message on Twitter following the episode, and he thanked him for it. And I know Kenny now a couple months, and I haven't met him in person yet, but he did say that next time he's at a game, we would connect. So hopefully soon, which is pretty cool. Again, those connections that you never would have thought you would have, but now it's kind of crazy to see.
That's awesome. And then you also have Tyson Wheeler on the show too, which is another URI team that was I think just a few seconds away from going to the Final Four if it wasn't for Mark Madsen on Stanford.
Yeah, I believe that was in the 90s with Lamar Odom. Katina Mobley was a little bit after that. I don't know too much about the Rhode Island Rams during that time, but they definitely had a lot of success in the late 90s. So it's pretty cool to have interviewed him. He's doing great things now at UMass as an assistant coach there.
That's great. Yeah. So you've had some great success with the show and some, great guests as well too. Is there anything you're really looking forward to with the podcast that you're looking to do forward with it?
I mean, I'm just going to keep pushing through, keep trying to get guests on. And I think the beauty of just a podcast in general is you're able to tell a story, really. I love to ask the guests that I have on from start to finish, about their high school career, coming out of high school, what the recruitment process was like, why they came across the University of Rhode Island or what attracted them to the school that they played at, what the collegiate level was like. And then they went on to play professionally, whether that's overseas or even in the NBA, what that experience was like. And then, where they're at now, whether they're coaching or retired life, anything like that. It's always crazy to, tell a story. So as many guests as I can have on. I've had, baseball players on. I've had women's soccer head coach on, recently got hired. Obviously men's basketball players. I had a women's basketball assistant coach on. I'm hoping to get more of the women's basketball players. That program is doing great right now, led by Tammy Reese. I'm hoping to get her on as well. So, as many guests as I can get that I think would tell an interesting story and, really appeal to my audience.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And you know what I think about the cool part is that come from too, is like when you ask guys those stories and those questions, is I feel like they tell stories that they haven't told in a while, or maybe they bring up something that they never really talked about before, or like only certain family members. So that's gotta be cool to like share those experiences, because I'm sure they're happy to talk more about those past careers as well too.
Yeah, I just had Will Leviton on. That episode will be coming out in a couple of days. And I asked him his favorite Dan Hurley memory, head coach before head coach David Cox, who's now currently the head coach at Rhode Island. But Dan Hurley, obviously a successful head coach who's with UConn now. He led Rhode Island to those tournaments back in 2017 and 18. And he, told a great story about just they were turning over the ball too much during practice and how he would take some of the basketballs from the rack and just punt them in the Ryan Center, like football style punt them.
Yeah.
And I just saw like the smile and the reaction on his face. And, those are the kinds of, I guess that's the joy I get out of asking those kinds of questions and telling the podcast. Cause, I didn't know something like that. And I'm sure nobody out there watching or coming across the video knew something like that. Only the people who were there at practice that day knew something like that. So, those are the best parts of the podcast, just hearing those stories. I guess when I first started out, I wasn't really asking those kinds of questions. Like, those rapid fire questions are always great. Go-to pregame song. What do you got playing in your ears? What kind of basketball player would you compare your game to? Those kinds of questions that really get them to think, but not really think too hard about it. Those are the best kinds of questions because it leads to so many different stories and the conversation is just flowing more and better.
Yeah, exactly. And it could turn into something like another great story, something like that. Yeah. And I kind of feel like I could picture Dan Hurley punting a basketball ball. Now I'm glad it is now confirmed by Will. So happy to hear that. That's pretty funny. And then you also call games, URI games on the radio and stuff like that. And what's the excitement about calling the games? I'm looking forward to doing that.
I mean, it's just exciting to be in the Ryan Center. Again, talking about opportunities that I never would have thought would have come. I guess as a freshman, I wasn't patient and I was just eager to get out there and do play-by-play or color and be the next Mike Breen or Clyde Frazier. But, you can't just jump right into a situation like that. So I was doing hosts for a lot of women's basketball games. At the time, the program wasn't doing as well as they are now. And then I worked my way up to color and eventually I got to play-by-play. I got 2 color commentary opportunities last year. I was one of only a couple media members to actually get into the Ryan Center. I only did 2 basketball games, but still better than nothing.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing I'm at every single men's basketball game. I'm calling a couple women's basketball games for the radio station, WRIU, student-run radio station on campus at URI. And I'm the FM sports director there. So it's really cool, being able to have spot charts and be able to call these exciting plays and then go back home and save the audio clip and then share it with some friends. It's all part of the portfolio, but when you're doing it, like you don't even think about, oh, this is going to benefit me in 10 years. You think about how cool this opportunity is, going to the press conference, post-game press conference afterward, getting even like, I remember the first time I was handed just media credentials and I got to put it, around my neck and hold up the badge, like that I can go into the locker room or go into the post-game press conference. Like, it's just so cool because those are the kinds of things you see on TV or you see on Twitter with some of the journalists that you follow. But now I'm a student journalist and I'm getting that opportunity myself at only 20 years old. So it's crazy. I mean, there's no one thing I can pinpoint that's, the best part about it. I think just the experience alone is the best part about it.
Yeah. And I mean, you're like you mentioned, you're 20 years old and more experiences are going to come. And I'm sure you're going to be wearing more of the media, passes for bigger games and down the line for other areas. And I'm like, it sounds like you already off to a great start with your career. So it's awesome to, get you in the door now before you get too big and famous. Forget about all of us little guys over here. So, but it's cool. What's that?
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you have great things coming down the line. But I want to talk some URI basketball because, you are the man to talk to about this. So I want to talk about some hoops, URI men's. We'll start with URI men's and then we'll go to URI women. But we'll talk about men. The men's team is 12-4 right now. Obviously, they had some COVID issues in December and missed some games, canceled or postponed games against Dayton. But like, what do you think about the URI men's team this year? They're compared to last year.
Yeah, no, I love the URI men's basketball men's basketball team right now. What I was gonna say is they don't really have one star player. That was the first thing I was gonna say that jumped out to me. And I think sometimes that can really hurt them. I think that hurt them last year. Obviously, COVID and not having fans in attendance definitely hurt them. The injuries got to them, of course, but in years past, they always had a star player. And in college basketball, so often they feed the star talent. This year, I mean, any given night, it could be anyone, whether one player has 8 points, another player has 9, one player is leading the charge with 11. No one's dropping 20 points on the University of Rhode Island Rams basketball team right now, which is, sometimes a great thing because they get recognized at the national level. But in terms of team chemistry, I mean, they're playing great. They had a couple of losses, of course, to Providence. You can't do anything about that. Davidson's playing out of their mind right now on the road, too. You can't do anything about that. And they almost blew it last night against LaSalle, but Ish Leggett was the hero. So, any given night, there could be a different hero. What I was going to say again was, there's no star player on this team. The depth is crazy, crazy good. They're a deep team off the bench. They play with 3 guards in their starting 5, which is Ish Leggett, Ish El-Amin, and Jeremy Shepard. And that's something, again, that I absolutely love. We don't see that often in college basketball, but the 3-guard method is great. It worked for them in 2017 and 2018 when they made those NCAA tournament runs. You had Jared Terrell, E.C. Matthews, Jeff Doughton, Stanford Robinson, Fats Russell, Jarvis Garrett. You had all these guards. They're such a guard-heavy team. So I think that's going to benefit them down the road. And then you have these 2 dominant forces in the paint, really manning the front court in the Mitchell twins. And Mikal Mitchell is playing out of his mind. He's the 20th best player in block shots per game in the nation and second in Atlantic 10, averaging nearly 3 blocks per game. I mean, it doesn't beat that. It's just the recruiting from top to bottom was great. I think they had a successful rebuild. I don't think they're completely done yet. We'll see further into conference play how they do. They have a couple of tough teams. They have to face Davidson again. VCU always gives them a tough time. And then I wouldn't rule out St. Bonaventure. They meet them later in the conference schedule. And going into this season, they were supposed to be ranked. They have probably one of the best duos in all of college basketball in Kyle Lofton, Osuna Suni. So I wouldn't rule that out yet. I mean, there's a lot to be said. But this Rhode Island Rams basketball team is great. And, I'm looking forward to more games and being a part of it.
Yeah. They really impressed me this year with the whole rebuild and then using the transfer portal over the past couple of years and be able to, get those guys in. Like you mentioned, Mikal Mitchell is playing out of his mind. He's playing great basketball. And I'm looking at the box scores now as we talk, and like you see Mitchell's name come up as like the top scorer for the team. But you also mentioned that I think they play better team basketball than they did last year. And I think that's like a huge success of like what they've been. And the 3-guard set is also really cool because I didn't think about it until you brought up that team and with those guys that they had with EC and Jared Terrell and Stanford Robinson and Jeff Doughton. So yeah, it's a way. I feel like it's a way different team. I feel like they move the ball a lot better too. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing worth noting is that they're 8-0 right now at home. And going back to just the team chemistry, you see the way that they play at home. You see the way that they're passing. Of course, there's the turnovers, but they've corrected that. And you see the progress that they've made over the last couple of games, especially through non-conference play and now into conference play. They're 3-1 in conference play. Of course, the loss to Davidson. And they weren't even supposed to open up in conference play to Davidson. They were supposed to open up to, I don't even remember.
George Mason or Dayton.
I know they were supposed to play George Mason. I know they're supposed to play Dayton. The LaSalle game got rescheduled, and we played that last night. There was a couple of teams that we were supposed to play before we even were supposed to play Davidson on the road. And we had our own COVID issues, and then the conference, canceled things. So there's things constantly changing. I guess you can put an asterisk next to last year's team, but it's in the years past. And you see that Coach Cox now in his 4th year as head coach has moved on, and he has his plan, and they're executing it perfectly. Again, they're 8-0 at home. The Ryan Center hasn't, as of the recording of this podcast, hasn't seen a loss. The women's basketball team is undefeated at home as well. And I think that also just goes to show you how much the fans were missed last year. I mean, like I mentioned, I had the opportunity to do 2 games last year, fortunately, because there really wasn't much to do on campus. And every time I went in there, it was great to even see live sports happening, but it was also really depressing just to see no one there and, the Rhody ruckus up on their feet. And now at least to have sort of that atmosphere and that environment, the fans, they really provide the energy, and the players, I know they feed off of it because they talk about it all the time during the press conferences and even when I talk to them. So it definitely shows as well, because if you look at the records at home compared to this year, they're substantially different. So
Yeah. And what's so, and well, I mean, you brought up last year too, like, and I'll jump back to this year's team, but last year, what was it like too, just to walk into like an empty stadium? How weird was that? Just to like, must have felt like you were watching a scrimmage or something, like, just because it had to be like a weird feeling not to see any crowd and have like maybe the crowd noise pumped in, and maybe like you're walking through the Ryan Center and there's like tumbleweeds going through there.
yeah, it was weird. I mean, I was walking past a bunch of cardboard cutouts. I didn't really like it. It was almost kind of creepy. But I also was just, I feel like in the moment I was just so excited because I was able to actually go to a game. And before that, the last time I went to a game, Obi Toppin was playing college.
Yeah.
Because I watched Rhode Island get killed by Dayton at the Ryan
Yes.
Center, and then I got home for spring break, and then everything got shut down. So the last time I went to, a real pre-COVID game with the fans, in the student section, Obi Toppin was playing at the Ryan Center, and
Yeah.
now he's on the New York Knicks. So it was weird. I mean, it was, I was able to actually, go to press conferences back then, even if I had 1 or 2 opportunities. Back then, it was only on Zoom. Fortunately, now we're actually able to go back in person. We do have the mask mandate, but anything that I've learned through all of this is that you just have to, be grateful for what we have, because it's crazy times. And, the fact that I was even able to have the opportunity to go in, again, when the media was limited to none, there were some games where they weren't even there. I'm definitely grateful for that, and everything and all the opportunities that I've gotten along the way at URI. So, again, there's last year and the flaws and everything that happened, but then I look ahead to this year and, you wear the mask, so what? At least we're playing good basketball. So
Yeah, exactly. I think that was actually my last live game too, was the URI Dayton. The URI Dayton game when Obi Toppin was playing. Like, Eddie just was such a monster. So
yeah,
yeah.
I rooted against him now, and now I'm a Knicks fan, so I root for him. So
yeah, it's funny how it changes when
yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens with some of these other guys like Jeff Dowden and Fats Russell. We're on the cusp of getting into the NBA, but maybe they'll join the Sixers and I'll hate them when I once rooted for them. So
yeah, who knows?
But
Jeff's playing pretty well. I mean, he's over
he's
out
playing great.
in out over on the Warriors. I think last G League game I watched, he dropped like 30 something points or something like that. He was
Yeah, he's bounced around. As of actually a couple of days ago, he's back with the Lakeland Magic now, which is the G League affiliate of Orlando.
Oh, really?
So he's been on a couple of 10 days. He was with the Milwaukee Bucks. He played for the Wisconsin Herd in a game, which is their G League affiliate. And now he's back with the Lakeland Magic. So, I mean, at least he's getting opportunities, which is great to see.
Yeah, I hope something eventually works out for him. He's a great player, and I hope obviously he seems like to be fitting in some sort of NBA system if he can stick around in the G League for as long as he has been.
Yeah.
But I want to also talk too. I mean, we both had him on the show, and he's playing on this year's team is Sebastian Thomas. Here's a Rhode Island kid, played his basketball at Bishop Hendricken, won a state championship here. Goes to Hoosac over prep school, plays in a couple AAU games, and gets noticed by URI, and he's really a hometown hero, and a lot of kids look up to him around here. What do you think about his play? And I know when I had him on my show, I'm not sure if it was the same thing when you had him on yours, but like I think he thought he was going to be redshirted. And that was the conversation. And then he ended up started playing, and the minutes he started getting, which is funny, because I was like, why is he playing if I was redshirted? But what do you think about his play, his stellar play, and how he's been able to come in as a freshman, just be such a great player?
Yeah, I'm super impressed with Sebastian Thomas so far. when I interviewed him back in the summer, he intended on redshirting.
Yeah.
And I'd watched a couple of his highlights at Bishop Hendricken. I knew he was a local kid at Providence. And I knew what he could do. I knew that, when he took the Ryan Center court, this is something that he had dreamed of and aspired to do for a long time. And I was excited. I was eager to see him and watch him play. And then I got the news right before my first broadcast that he would actually be playing off the bench. And he's been great. I mean, I feel like every year there's a true freshman or a true point guard or true freshman. And he really is that true freshman this year. Ish Leggett was sort of that last year. We thought he was going to be a point guard. He's sort of, there is no point guard or shooting guard in college basketball, but he's sort of more of a shooting guard. Sebastian Thomas takes up the ball. He's your point guard. You know what he can do now for the future. I think the future is bright for him. He really does have a lot of potential, and he has a high ceiling. I think he does need to gain a little bit more confidence, and, that will come in time. I think he's already shown more flashes of, him gaining confidence and taking those shots, but there's development along the way that will, come. But he's a great basketball player. For him to do what he's doing already at 18, 19 years old, most kids can't even get there. Again, I didn't even know if he was eligible by the NCAA to play, because I know he played 3 years at Bishop Hendricken and then he took a prep year. I wasn't really sure what happened with COVID, and he sort of explained it on my podcast. But then again, when I got the news that he impressed Coach Cox and his staff during the preseason, some of their practices, and even the exhibition, I was super excited about it. And, again, it only helps the bench more. It only helps the depth more. Having a true point guard or a true guard off the bench is always great, especially when you have 3 in the starting 5. So, he helps the rotation out. He does his job. And I'm super excited to see what he does 2-3 years down the road, because I think he'll be 10 times better.
Yeah, I'm super excited for him. I'm so happy for him too. He's a really great kid, and he very sincere, and I can tell too his interviews as he gets going on his interviews too. I think from like our first one to like seeing him on yours, and as well as mine and some others, that the confidence on the interviews is going well too. But like, I just love what he's doing, and he's definitely a hometown hero. It's great to see all the kids look up to him and love, like, going to the games, and you see it all over Instagram, and kids getting autographs with him and taking pictures. So I'm really happy for him. I'm glad it worked out, and glad he's playing the great ball that he is. So just excited to see him develop. And you said, I think he's definitely a true point guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, I mean, he's such a down to earth guy, the way he was answering some of my questions too. I mean, great guy. I didn't know going into the interview, you never really know with some of these guys who are coming out of high school, how mature they are, but he was polite throughout the entire interview. I knew he was ready to play collegiate basketball, and, he earned his spot on the team, and, I'm super happy that he's playing in those minutes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do.
Yeah, I'm really pumped for him. And now I want to jump over to the women's basketball, because women's basketball last year, they had a great season. And then now this year, even more phenomenal of a season. I think Coach Tammy Reese had also taken advantage of the transfer portal. And the URI women's team is 14-3, 8-0 at home, like you mentioned, 4-0 in conference play, 5-2 in away. What do you think about their squad and how they've been doing?
Yeah, I've only had the opportunity to watch a couple of their games. I did watch the game the other night against UMass at home. I mean, they're playing great basketball right now. They're doing everything they need to do to win. It looked like during non-conference play, they were winning games, scoring 100 points. I mean, up there in the 80s, 90s, 100 points. I'm surprised they're not even ranked yet. It really does, boggle me. But, they came in the preseason poll, projected to finish second in the A10. I think, for Rhode Island men's basketball, I think, coming in 7-8, I think they could finish top 5, and I still stick by that prediction. Maybe even top 3 if all goes their way. For women's basketball, I think they can win it all. I mean, This team, talk about depth. I mean, they have it all. Marta Vargas, I want to shout her out first, or highlight her off the bench. Sometimes she gets a starting role. She's the longest player to be on the team. She actually was on the team before Tammy Reese took over. So she's the last player to be there, from the previous coach's era. She's playing great minutes. And then you have players like Dolly Carnes, Emmanuel Tahan, who we saw last year, how great of a player she is. And then talk about using the transfer portal and getting players like Des Elmore from Seton Hall. Tammy Reese does a great job at recruiting. She was at Syracuse before. She was at the University of Rhode Island. She played at the University of Virginia, 2 great programs right there. She knows what she's doing. They also have an assistant coach from France, and they have a ton of players from France that actually played on the national team.
Oh, wow.
So, they know what they're doing in terms of recruiting, and it really shows on the court. It's just a shame that they don't get enough, attendance at some of the games compared to the men's games, because they really are playing great basketball. And again, like I said, they beat UMass the other night, who I always thought was a better team, women's basketball wise, than Rhode Island, but we beat them. It was a great game. And now I think, I'm starting to feel like we can win it all.
Yeah. What do you think too, for like a coach Coach Reese takes over in a weird year during COVID, but is able to, turn this program in the span of just a short time, 2 years, because usually it takes 4 years. You have to wait till you get your players in, like you get your system in and everything like that. Like in a lot of eras, like recruits, like what do you think of like her just being able to like flip the program so quickly? Like you don't really ever see that a lot. And like for her to just like flip the program like that, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Coach Reese actually has been here for 3 seasons now. So my freshman year was her first season. So she's been here as long as I have. Everyone I've talked to that's met her, I've even talked to her or spoken with her, they've said, how much she's just wanted this job her whole entire career. Even athletic director Thor Bjorn, I interviewed him and I asked him, what went into the process what went into that decision to hire her as the head coach. And he said, that she just wanted it. And you could tell through the interview that she just felt like she was ready to be the head coach. And she mentioned apparently during her interview that other opportunities came up to become a head coach at the collegiate level, and she just wasn't ready, but now she's ready. And that stood out to them right away. And they hired her on the spot. Looking back now, 3-4 years later, it was the right decision because of the success. So, my freshman year, they had a great season. Maybe it didn't go the way that they intended on going, but it was sort of a regroup year, sort of a rebuild year. And then the next year they had a great season as well last year. But again, COVID and circumstances that play into that. But through it all, they had a long winning streak through conference play, and she ended up winning A10 Coach of the Year, which the last time that happened was, I don't even know, at the University of Rhode Island, the last time someone won A10 Coach of the Year. And now this year they're undefeated at home. Like you just read all the stats. They're great. I think they can, again, definitely finish first in the standings, and hopefully I get the opportunity to have her on the podcast soon, because she's a great coach. And, again, I've met her and I've talked to her. She's a great person as well. So if there's anyone who's going to lead our program, it's going to be her.
Yeah. Like I mentioned off air, I had her on my show, and she's on this show, and she's phenomenal. It was such a, you felt like you've known her for years. Just a conversation that you got, like I was just having with her. I was like, she just treated me like, sometimes people can kind of big time you, and you don't know what you're going to get when you interview someone at that level. But she was just all the success in her past and everything leading up to her. She was just so you just felt welcomed, and you wanted to hang out. You just didn't want to get off. We didn't even want to get off recording. I was like, bro, but she's just such a nice person, and so well deserved. I'm glad that, like you mentioned, Thor Bjorn made the right hire on that one and for the interview process. So I'm very, very happy that it worked out.
Another thing about her is she's so honest too. There's not many coaches like that, especially at the collegiate level. No one's gonna tell you, what went wrong one game, or what exactly didn't work. Most of the time you'll get these answers like, we have to be better next time, but she'll be honest with you up front and tell you what went wrong, and we have to, fix and make these adjustments and take these necessary steps to succeed. And I think, all the players certainly rally around her. She's a leader, and you see it at the end of every game. She takes center court, she breaks down huddle with her team, win or loss. And, again, the whole team just rallies around her, and I wish more fans would come out and see it, because what they're doing over there is great. And I do hope that they get ranked at some point this season, or at least during her time here at URI.
Yeah, I would have thought they would be ranked by now, and hopefully down the line that they do, and hopefully they don't keep getting overlooked. So it's definitely well deserved for sure. But it's awesome to see that, and I feel like URI sports right now, the success that everything's going on, I feel like there's been some really great successful seasons in football and now basketball too, and both boys and women and men. So it's really cool. But Adam, you're extremely lucky. I'm glad to have you on the show because I be honest, I haven't really been watching as much URI basketball, so I feel like you kind of helped me out on some things that I've been kind of missing out. So being mostly focused on high school sports here, so it's cool that have an expert on the show and talk to you about them.
Yeah, I'm glad I could help out, and check us out. I mean, don't sleep on URI. I feel like University of Rhode Island, men's basketball, women's basketball, or just really athletics in general, they'll confuse you at times, they'll let you down at times, but even if it's not a successful season, they'll come back the next year and they'll prove you wrong. And I mean, football is the greatest example. I think you just brought it up. They've had years of losing in under 500 for years, and this year finishing, I think it was 7-4. It's incredible. It was incredible to see. Meade Stadium was packed during COVID too.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, what everyone's doing at the University of Rhode Island, the community, the athletics department, between the athletic directors and student journalists and sports information team, everyone's doing a great job, and especially the athletes too. I mean, the success comes with them, but the fans will come out when the success is there, and I've certainly seen more fans too, which is great to see live sports and more fans there, especially through COVID and everything. So, hopefully all the sports can have successful seasons at URI and, continue on the track that they're going.
Yeah. Hopefully we get, and then like you mentioned, the fans, hopefully we get back to some normalcy where masks are contained and we can, our cheers will be even louder in the stands and a lot more noise without the mask covering up. But, I'm glad that we're able to get back in there at least and be able to see the games. And like you said, it's all on the athletes and the coaches and the whole URI athletic department for what they're doing for creating such a great environment now at URI and doing everything there.
Absolutely. On and off the field. Like, again, if it weren't for some of these people, the athletes that I've had the opportunity to interview, the athletics department who's given me opportunities within media, I wouldn't even be in some of the positions that I'm in right now. So, everything happens for a reason. I'm grateful that I'm here at the University of Rhode Island, a school, 10 years ago, or, growing up as a kid, I maybe thought about going because I had legacy that went there. I'd be the only kid in New York walking around with a Rhode Island sweatshirt on while other kids had Ohio State, Syracuse, all these other, schools. But I had a Keene Blue RI, interlocking RI on my sweatshirt walking through the halls. And, I got a lot of interesting faces, but now, you look at the success that we've had the last couple of years, and, certainly a lot of people are probably regretting the faces that they've made, especially myself. I'm glad that I'm at the University of Rhode Island. I'm in the situation I'm in, and, I'm very thankful for the connections that I've made and the resources that I have there. So, yeah.
I'm really happy for you. I'm glad everything's working out. I have one more last question before we sign off that I always ask everyone, and you being from New York and living in Rhode Island for a few years, I mean, I have two, so I should say I have two questions I should ask. One is, do you have like a favorite restaurant or a place to go in Rhode Island?
Favorite restaurant? Well, I'm not a Rhode Islander, so, I know pretty much Narragansett, all of Narragansett. I live there now too. But, there's a lot of great brunch spots, I have to say. Some of the breakfast in Rhode Island, like top tier. I got to give it to like Teas in Narragansett, or it's a chain, never heard of Teas, never seen a Teas, anything like that. Never even heard of like Cumbies or anything like that. We don't have that in New York. There's some great spots, I would probably say Teas, great coffee, great food, highly recommended. This is not a promotion, by the way, but not a sponsorship, nothing like that. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of great places within the area. Definitely another great reason for coming to URI. So
yeah, definitely good reason. All right, sorry, I added another question on there. Have had a favorite guest that you've had on the show so far?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, actually. I don't know if there's one specific guest that was my favorite, but an answer I always say Thorbjorn. He was great, such a great down-to-earth person, and I've gotten to know him now on a more personal level, especially after that interview. Amazing person, and he does his job. He's great at it. Best athletic director in the country, in my opinion. But I would also say Stanford Robinson, a former URI basketball player, played on a couple of those teams. Another great down-to-earth guy. You don't get a lot of basketball players, especially guys who are playing professionally overseas and who used to play collegiate ball, who are so honest with you and so willing to have a conversation with you and talk for an hour, hop on Zoom. But I asked him about his favorite memories at URI, on the court and off the court. I asked him about game-winning corner 3 shot he had against Duquesne when they were ranked. That was probably one of my favorite questions that I just had the opportunity of asking on the podcast, because I remember that one I was actually doing with my friend who I started the podcast with, who was an offensive lineman on the team. And I was like, I don't care what you ask, but just let me ask the question about the buzzer beater. Because again, I wasn't even committed to URI at the time, but I may have been like a junior or senior in high school. And I just remember watching that game with my dad. They were, at the national level on CBS Sports or whatever, or NBC Sports.
Yeah.
I think they were 23rd or 24th ranked, and they're about to get beaten at home by Duquesne. Wasn't even ranked. And then Stanford Robinson gets the corner. I think Jeff Doughton took the ball up. Robinson gets to the corner, knocks down the 3, and, everyone just piles on the storm the court. At least the team does. And that's, that was just watching that. It's amazing. And now that I got to actually ask the guy who knocked down the shot the question, was incredible. He was such a great guest. But, I feel like all the guests that I've had on were special and different in their own way. But those are 2 that maybe just stand out more than some of the others to me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember that game too. That was a fantastic game. It was a lot of fun. It was actually at that game. It was wild, a wild environment. Yeah, did not expect that to be that close to a game, and then that corner 3 was crazy. And then my last question is, I asked everyone this one: favorite thing to do outside of sports? Like, what do you enjoy?
That's tough, because my go-to line is, like, what do you do? And I tell people that I play sports, I watch sports, and I cover sports. So it's hard, but I'll think of something. I'm gonna need a minute to think. Honestly, stop me.
It's a tough question.
I feel like I'm just so wrapped up in my schedule, and it's just always watching sports and podcasting and stuff like that.
No, it sounds like you have a busy schedule.
Yeah, but I'll give a weird answer here, but maybe just writing and reading about, I won't say sports, but, doing research on those things. I like history. I never really appreciated school that much, but I guess now with the major I'm in now, and social media too, and I won't be specific and say sports, but, I just found a love for sort of this kind of stuff, and found a passion for watching documentaries and hearing people's stories. And, I'll say, now I'm telling these stories through the podcast. So, I guess that was sort of a passion or something inside of me that I always sort of loved, but I didn't really know it, or I didn't know how to say it. I feel like when I'm not covering sports or playing sports, watching sports, I'm always researching about something, even if it's not sports related. Music wise, entertainment wise, I love watching movies. Should have said that. Originally, I love watching movies. Big movie guy, like comedies, stuff like that. Some of the Marvel movies, those are my favorite. I'm all over the place. Never really have time to do anything. I'm always kind of procrastinating and doing random stuff, but hopefully it's all going to something good someday. So
yeah, definitely. Well, it sounds like you're off to a great start with your career, being 20 years old, and being able to do what you're doing now with a podcast, and as well, calling URI games and doing the coverage, and having the connections that you made so far. And I'm sure a great, bigger and better things are down the road for you as you just keep working hard, because it sounds like you extremely work hard. And so it's awesome to have you on the show. It was great to talk URI sports with you, and I really appreciate your time and everything like that. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, anytime.